Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. During the last segment, I talked to you about cleaning instruments, and I kept referring to a cleaning rod that I use to clean instruments with. And I'm going to show this to you. I didn't show it last time, but I did have it with me, and this is it that I use. Now, these come in different sizes. It's not truly a cleaning rod, but it is a cleaner, and it's used to absorb moisture from an instrument. They come in different sizes, and some of them are fairly large. I've seen those for saxophones where they put them in the saxophone and keep them in the saxophone between the times when they're playing it, so it's in there all the time when the saxophone is not being used. And I imagine it's very protective, but they're very, very thick. But for a recorder this size, and this is just the body of a recorder that I used to explain what I did to clean it in the last segment, if you have something and it's not, as I said, truly a rod, it's fuzzy on one end, and you stick it in, and you can go all the way up and all the way down. You know, you can do it in different directions, and that clears out whatever's in there, and it dries it out. If there's any extra moisture, it takes it out, and they're very, very helpful. Now, what I might have done, what I did with this instrument that I talked about that acted like it had something in it that obstructed it, I didn't put alcohol in it, but I moistened it with water, and this was the one I used. I moistened it with water and then squeezed it out a little bit, so it wasn't just soppy wet, but it was pretty damp, and went up and down, and that really cleared it. I don't know what it was, but it did clear it. Now, I could, under certain circumstances, if I needed to, would be to take alcohol and put alcohol on this and go up and down with alcohol, but you wouldn't want to do it in an instrument that had pads, you know, because you don't want that getting on pads. It would hurt the pads, and then you'd have to have the pads replaced, which is a repair job, which you don't need to have. But it's very interesting that even water will help. And if it's a wooden instrument, there's no real way of disinfecting a wooden instrument, because whatever you put on it that would kill germs will also split the wood. So you never put alcohol on a wooden instrument. You can take a damp cloth and kind of wipe it off. And as I tell students, don't let anybody else use your instruments, because if a person has a cold or they're sick or they don't feel good or something's going on with them and people share the mouthpieces, well, then you see you share the germs too. And so that's why I really prefer, if you're teaching music, that each person have their own instrument. Now, with the recorders and the flutophones and the beginning instruments, they're not that expensive, and that the school can provide or the student can buy or the parents can buy on their own. And then they use it, and they're the only ones that use it, and that's very protective in the sense of germs and getting sick and all that. But if you have students come in, they're very young, they pass the instruments around like it's candy practically, and they don't even realize that they could put themselves in danger for catching something if another child is sick. But so they don't understand that. So you have to have a way of cleansing them. For plastic instruments, and most of the recorders are going to be plastic, there's no reason why you can't use alcohol, and that will kill germs. For wood, you can't use alcohol. Just remember that. And you don't put it in boiling water, and you don't do any of that stuff. Just rubbing alcohol is enough. And you can get alcohol in packets. You know, diabetics do that a lot because they will take and rub their skin where they give themselves injections. So you can get it in little packets, and they just rip open the packet and just use the little square that has alcohol in it and then toss it away. Or you can use a bottle of rubbing alcohol and get a soft cloth and do it. It's the same thing. I have used the packets. When I was teaching, I used to carry some of those packets with me. And then if I had to try an instrument because a student had trouble with it and I wanted to check it to see if the instrument was okay or if it had a problem and they couldn't get notes because there was something wrong with the instrument, the only way way for me to find that out is to play their instrument. That would be the only reason I would play the instrument. The only other reason to play the instrument is to see if it's pitching all right. If they're continually off pitch, is it them because they're not putting enough air in the instrument, or is the instrument off pitch naturally? So for some things, I would have to play their instruments. As a general rule, I did not play their instruments and they did not play mine. Once in a while, though, there would be an exception to the rule, and I would need to play their instrument to see if it was all right. If the instrument wasn't all right, I could disinfect mine and let the student play mine for a while to see if they did better on it, because after all, if you have an instrument that's not working right, they're not going to be able to play right, and they're not going to necessarily know that there's anything wrong. And the only way I would know there was anything wrong was to try it myself. So that means disinfecting instruments and playing them, and then disinfecting them again when you give the instrument back to the student. So the instrument is always disinfected. That's the only safe way to do it. But anyway, these little cleaners are really, really handy depending upon the size of the instrument that you have. You don't want to get anything too tight, because even though it squeezes when you push it through, you could get something stuck in there, and that would be a problem to get it back out. So you always have to make sure that it's not too thick, and if it resists too much and you can't force it in, don't force it in. Get one that's smaller. There is a rod that you can buy, a regular cleaning rod, and it's basically a long piece of plastic, and then it has a little needle-like thing on one end, and you put a piece of cloth through it, like a piece of flannel, something small, something soft, not very big, and you use it in the same kind of way. But I like these a lot better. These are a lot better to use, and this is what I stick with. But if you buy a flute, even if you buy a recorder, what they're going to come with is these little pieces of plastic, these little rods with a needle on one end. It's easier to carry it because it fits right in the instrument easily, and the case of the instrument even may have a little indentation where you put it. And then you just have to stick the cloth in and take the cloth out before you put the rod back into the case. So, and I imagine it's a lot cheaper to do it that way as well. But I like these a lot better. So I wanted just to kind of complete that. Now, one instrument that I want to show you that I brought in is this one here. This instrument comes from the Caribbean. And I don't know what country it comes from. I don't think it's Peruvian, because the style of the art is different than you find on the Peruvian instruments. The Peruvian instruments, like I had that I showed last segment, they have a certain style. You know, the design is like in a certain style. This is different. It's got pictures of a bell, pictures of a butterfly. If you look, I hope you can see the butterfly. It's right here. And then you have leaves and the bell. It's very attractive. And then you have the little band in the middle that has its own design on it. It's a very, very attractive instrument. And then it has more designs on top. And it looks like lettering on top. I don't know what language that is, but it may be lettering from a language. This is very small. You know, this would be the normal size of the Peruvian instruments, which is a little larger, by the way, than the recorder. It's maybe an inch or two larger than most recorders. But look at the difference in the size. This is very small. But it plays very, very well. And when I got it, my sister and one of her friends had bought it at a mall or something. And they were embarrassed to give it to me as a gift because they said, we can't make it play. There's something wrong with it, it won't play. Well, when anybody says there's something wrong with it, it won't play, I view that as a challenge, that maybe they just don't know how to tweak it into playing. This is in the key of D, and when we took it home, I played it, and I love it. It's wonderful. And then when I got home, my sister and I played a whole bunch of Christmas carols, and it kept perfect pitch. So I just want to show you, it's a little different in terms of where your thumb goes, because your thumb on the back, that thumb hole, which is there, is higher than the where your finger holes. Usually my finger hole would be right up here. They'd be like opposite, but not so on this instrument. And I think they probably get into trouble trying to play it because they didn't realize that you have to cover that hole in the back, and that hole is in an unusual position. Now you're going to lose it there because that octave is going to be a little bit flat. But basically, you can play well over an octave. You can play an octave and a half. That's an actual song, so I just broke a copyright law. But this is an actual song. I don't know what the song is, but I've heard it a lot, and it's done by organists. But at any rate, I happened to think of it, and I said, wow, to myself, why not try it and see if it'll work? So very nice instrument. Okay, now we were talking about instruments and learning how to play them and learning how to read music. And so I'm going to play something now. And then I'm going to show you a little bit. I'm going to play what's on here. And this is a song that I wrote maybe a couple days ago. When I write music, I mean, I'm not going to be a Mozart or anybody like that, but when I write music, the song comes to me, and it comes to me the whole thing. I don't struggle with, I sit down, well, if I get that for the melody line, what am I going to use to the bridge? I get the whole song in my mind at once, and all I have to do is write it down. So I'm going to give you an example of reading music. I'll play this song. I'll go over it a little. Then I want to show you a song that I wrote that isn't really a song, just to show you some of the symbols, and we'll take it from there. So this is how it goes. That's the whole song. Now, what makes it? I'm going to kind of dissect this for you. This is the song right here, 4/4 time, and it goes pretty fast. You can tell the way I played it. 1 sharp. So therefore, you're in the key of G because it's 1 sharp, and it's 4/4 time. That means that you have 4 beats to a measure, and it would be the equivalent of a quarter note, because a quarter note is a fourth of a whole note. So these are the quarter notes. So I have a 3-beat rest, 1, 2, 3, and then this is the 4th beat to bring out that measure to the 4 beats. Now these are triplets. 1, 2, 3, 1 beat. 1, 2, 3, 1 beat. 1 beat on the quarter note, and then 2 eighth notes is a beat, because an eighth is a half of a beat. So you can count each measure and get 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and that's 1 beat. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and these dotted eighths and sixteenths are each one of them 1 beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I go back to the triplets and so forth. And that's reading music. If you don't have a concept in terms of what the triplets are, and you try to play them as eighth notes, because they're usually written as eighth notes, even though there are 3 to a beat, then you can get yourself into real trouble. Reading music is being able to understand the signs of music. And I read that and I know what I'm supposed to play. I also know how to finger the notes. I know when to breathe. I know how to tongue. I would know how to phrase it if I had phrasing because I wanted it loud or soft or fast or slow. Now let me flip back and I'm going to show you, this is not a real song, but I wrote it to make it look like a real song. And I just want to go over some of the signs that you will be reading when you're reading music, because I've just loaded this up with signs. And so we'll do this chart when we get that set up a little. Good, thank you. All right, you have your time, 4/4, 4 beats to a measure, and it's a quarter note is worth 1 beat. You have your 2, this is in the key of D. You have 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp, which puts it in the key of D. Now you'll notice a little sign here. That is a quarter note, and I've got equal to 70. What does that mean? Well, if you set a metronome measures time, and you can set it so it beats for you. If it's like 40 beats to a minute, it's like boom, boom, bum, bum, you know, not very fast. If it's 90 beats to a minute, it beats much faster. Da, 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 da. So it tells you how fast it goes. Metronomes are all right to teach people how to count to begin with, but you wouldn't want to use it all the time because you don't want to get dependent on it. But at any rate, what this is saying, you know, this is 4/4 time, so a quarter note gets 1 beat. That 1 quarter note goes 70 beats a minute. So therefore, it's a fairly rapid time. This tells you it's more than 60 beats a minute, so therefore it's like more than 1 a second, a little bit more than 1 a second. And so that tells you that it's fairly fast, not horrendously fast, but fairly fast. And if you set the metronome, it'll beat 1, 2, 3. It's like a little click, 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 so you can go by that. And this here, I want to pull this down. This will get in my way if I don't. This here is a phrase mark. A phrase mark is usually 4 measures. It's like these notes go together. They're like a phrase. You know, if you're reading a story, if you're talking, you talk in phrases. I would say, "Hi, Rick, how are you today?" That would be like a phrase. All of those words go together. He would say, I'm fine, Pat. Well, how are you doing today?" That's another phrase. You wouldn't say, "Hi, Rick, how are you doing today? I'm doing well today. I hope you're doing well today." And it runs on and on and on and on without any pauses, without any stops. That would be unnatural. You don't talk that way. You know, and people don't listen that way. So these notes go together like a phrase. Now, among that, you have this 2 little lines here. This really denotes the fact that this is an introduction. These notes come before the main note. They're a part of the same song. There's nothing that makes them different except that it kind of leads into the song, and this double line tells you that the song is beginning, and this is an introduction to it. Introductions can be 1 note. An introduction can be a whole line, but introductions can be various lengths of time, various lengths. So this just happens to be a small one. And let's see, then you have this P, P, P. That's pianissimo. That means you start off very, very soft. If it was F, 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 it would be fortissimo, which would be very loud. So this is very soft. And this here is like a caret sign. And it starts off at that point, which is very soft, and then it gets increasingly, gradually louder, and then you get the double F, that's moderately loud, fairly loud, and then it comes down to being soft again. And that tells you, you get louder and louder, you hit your peak, and then you start getting softer and softer. Already, I know how to play this piece. Then, and here it starts again. It's soft, goes up to MF, which is moderate forte, which is moderately loud, and then it stays there. And let's see, poco a poco, I put that in. Poco a poco means little by little. So if you're going to go loud, if you're going to go from moderately loud to quite loud, you do it gradually. You don't do it all at once. So poco a poco means just doing it gradually. And this is a hold sign. When you get here, you hold that note. Now it's a 4-beat note because it's 4/4 time, but it wants to be longer than that because whoever composed it, namely myself, decided that it needs to be a longer note. How long do you hold it? As long as you want. But you use reason in terms of deciding how long it's held, and then you stop. You take a little break. You don't just go from here to here. You take a little break. That's what the slashes is. You stop. Now, it's only for a fraction of a second, but it comes to a stop, and then you begin again. That's what that slash is. And then you have these notes here, these little lines. That means you emphasize that note. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily louder, but you kind of emphasize it when you're playing it like it's important. So you make sure you kind of make sure that it's distinguishable. That's what those notes, those lines mean. Now, here is a sign. And you don't pay any attention to it quite yet. I've got 3 minutes left, so you don't pay any attention to it yet. You play until you get down to the place where it would say, which is at the end of the song, D-S al fine. I know it says F-I-N-E, but it's pronounced fine, not fine. D-S al fine means you go back to the sign, which is right here. I mean, it's quite a distance back. It's not like it's on the same line. So you kind of take note of it as you're playing it. As you're playing it, you don't do anything then. But you take note of the fact that it is there. And when you get down to here, D-S al fine, that means you go to the sign and you play until the end of the song. And the end of the song is right here where it says al fine. That's the end. Now, as you're doing that, you don't repeat any of the repeat signs. When you play it at first, you get here and say you've just played this. You go here and you play this and you go back to the repeat sign and you play it again because it's repeated. And then when you go here, this is al fine. You don't do anything with that when you first play it. You go here, and this little line means something. This means play that measure again. Instead of writing it all over again, it says play it again. And if you want it repeated 4 times, you put that little 4 up there. It could be 5, it could be 16 times, it could be 70 times, anything you want. But when you write it, this prevents you from having to write this 70 times again, you know. This needs to be repeated 4 times because that little 4 is up there. If you have that little line and there's no number, you only repeat that once, okay? Then you get down here, the hold. This is your pianissimo again. You get down here, there's another repeat sign, and you go up here, that's repeated. And then when you play down here, you get to the D-S al fine, you go up to the sign, and then you go to the al fine. That's the end of the song. You don't do any repeats when you're doing the al fine. You know, when you're going to the sign and going through it, you don't repeat all of the repeat marks. You just go straight through without repeats until you get to the al fine. That's the end of the song. Now, I have read an entire piece of music, and we're completely out of time, so I'm going to do more of this and explain more of this and show you the signs next week. So please join me then. We're just beginning this.